Just kidding, it's fucking Cyclone again. It's always Cyclone again. But hear me out before you leave. For it is all the coolness of Wildstrike packed into the smooth playability of Cyclone. What this build is cast on crit Cyclone attached with all of the Wildstrike goodness. That is Arc, Freeze Pulse, and Flame Surge. And the absolute best thing about this build is it's not Wildstrike. I tried quite hard to make Wildstrike work, but in the end it just kinda reminded me that I should be playing Reeve or Cyclone or Sweep, something like that. But this actually works out pretty well and lets you customize as well in the way you don't even have to be Wildstrike setup. Because I'm going to have to level with you, the Wildstrike setup is actually not the most efficient one. So my current preferred setup has actually been Ice Nova in place of Freeze Pulse, and that is because it gives you a more reliable and larger AoE, whereas Freeze Pulse is a bit more of a single target. You still maintain your Arc and Flame Surge. It's rather close to Wildstrike. So you can see once again here that Ice Nova does quite a lot of good work for freeze, AoE and all that. Your Flame Surge more or less takes care of your single target, and your Arc basically takes care of some good AoE, single target, and your shock chance for the build. All in all, they synergize pretty well to work together in a nice comfortable trio. But it's still highly optimizable. I like to use Arctic Breath in place of Ice Nova for single target most of the time, and then you can put in Freeze Pulse, Arctic Breath, Flame Surge, something like that for Atziri runs, just for heavier single target. It is very much up to the player, I think, in the end. I have been trying out all kinds of setups, and I still have basically no idea what I like most. Which is why it's a good idea just to level up as many gems as possible and try them out. And you're not even bound to Carcass Jack if you end up doing some other sorts of setups, as the AoE won't benefit you as much for all of your spells. So as for the character itself, it's essentially built quite similar to the old Fakener. I was just a bit sick of Discharge in the end after playing it for so long, and I wanted to try and build a bit more defensive overall and a bit more customizable. And in the end I was running just Cyclone, Cast on Crit with 4 spells attached. I've only just recently incorporated Life Leech into the setup because I feel like I can easily afford to drop a spell in terms of damage for more survivability. So now I have Life Leech and Veil Pact, and it's really quite good. But up until then I was running Cyclone, Cast on Crit, Arc, Ice Nova, Flame Surge, and something else, whatever you want. I was running Glacial Cascade most of the time, I do believe, or Freeze Pulse. I was doing Shock Nova a lot of the time as well. I've been leveling and interchanging most of these spells from time to time. But if you really want a bit more consistency, Life Leech is great for that, because without Life Leech I was basically sustaining off of Atziri's Flask and 1 Life Flask, and it worked for a good 90 levels, but right now I kind of want to be more reliable in the high-end maps. The gear itself, so you don't have to use a Vol's Protector like you do in Fakener. You basically use whatever chest you want, and Carcass Jack is the one I chose because you get a good range for your Cyclone, and originally I was using Ice Nova, Shock Nova, Glacial Cascade, so I was scaling a lot of AoE. In the end I'm not doing that anymore, but it's still good for your Ice Nova, still good for your Flame Surge, and your actual Cyclone hit range as well, which is a bit more safer. So Carcass Jack's the chest I chose. You can choose something else, but yeah, I think I'd still choose Carcass Jack. Extra gore though, bit of a problem for FPS issues, so careful with that one. And also something to mention, up until now I was running Grace instead of Anger, and I've only just now taken Grace off and started leveling in Anger because basically it gives me like 10% evasion, and I feel like my evasion's barely doing anything anyway. So my main form of defense now is dodge, spell dodge, and some evasion, but not too much, because I'm also not wearing a evasion shield, which brings me to our shield slot. It's a pretty large damage slot. You don't get a whole lot of spell power from the passive tree. You just get some elemental damage here and a bit of spell power around there. Aside from that, you just get dual spell power, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So a huge amount of spell power on your shield is a large damage increase. So if you can get a shield with life, spell power, a couple of resists, that's just awesome. I'll get this one for about 15 chaos. They're not worth too much because it doesn't have high ES, and no one's really going for these types of shields. And then of course, you got a Vegan Dagger. Mine's kind of a piece of shit. I have been trying to regal daggers quite a lot for vegan, and just haven't managed to hit any good ones, so I haven't multi-modded them. Ideally you want to multi-mod it and then get attack speed, crit, and spell power, so I'm missing a good 40 spell power on there and some better attack speed, but it still does the job and has served me well for a good 50 levels. Rat's Nest, as always, solid choice. Gloves, chose not to go Malagaros, just gonna end up losing too much life, and I need to fill out my resist somewhere as well. Life, resist, attack speed, all good stuff there anyway. Boots, I went for Atziri's Step and I got a lucky +1 Frenzy Corruption on them, so in the end I have 46 spell dodge, and that's a good chunk of spell dodge for your Reflect, which means even without Life Leech I'm surviving Reflect pretty comfortably, and have been. So I do recommend these boots if you can make them work through resist everywhere else. Which brings us to our belt, because it's got good triple resist. Ideally, you can buy something with 2 good resists at life. It's pretty cheap at that stage then. This one cost me 15 or 20 chaos, I think. And then put on a 3rd resist, and you got yourself a tri-res high life belt. Now to make all this work, before I was using Life Leech, I just had Cyclone and Cast on Crit, which meant I needed precisely 16 minus mana on my Elrond Jewelry. My Elrond Jewelry is kind of lackluster, but that doesn't matter. It's just there to serve the purpose of minus 16 mana, and then you can run 4 spells completely for free. Once you want to start running Life Leech as well, that's when you got to put on an Elrond Amulet as well, because in the end, your Cyclone will cost 22 mana, I do believe. So you need at least a -6 there. Before that, I was using a pretty good neck of just life, crit, spell power, crit multi. It's not that great, but you got to fill out some int, some life, and hopefully some crit as well if you can. But once I put Life Leech into the setup, I need to put another Elrond Amulet and another Elrond Jewelry, and that's just fine. It serves its purpose, and yeah, got to get some int from your jewelry is the important thing, as well as minus mana, and eventually some more life. So I could still hit about 5k life if I tried hard enough. But at this stage, I'm just sitting at 4,700. Other things to mention. Let's see. Herald of Ice, Curse on Hit, Saturn's Mark, Herald of Thunder, as always. That is going to be keeping up your power charges, and it's very efficient in doing so. Herald of Ice actually does quite a lot of AoE damage as well, so that's one of the ones you really can't lose if you want to lose one of your skills for whatever reason. Herald of Ice does a lot of AoE damage, and it's pretty much irreplaceable. Using 2 Vile skills, Vile Grace, Vile Haste, increased duration, pretty good stuff there. Whirling Blades, faster attacks, and Fortify, that's part of where I get a lot of my Fortify from, and it's completely free with 3 Elrond Jewelries, and slot in Anger there. If you can't maintain free without Amulet, then you just go Blood Magic in your setup there. Prior to running a Life Leech, I was just sustaining all of my Frenzy charges of Frenzy single target paired with Power Charge on Crit and Fortify. So I got into a playstyle where I'd just run around and stab things just before I got into the battle, and I'd maintain my Frenzy charges that way, as well as keeping up Fortify a lot of the time, and occasionally getting some free Power charges. This was very efficient. Actually, not that efficient, it was very effective is what I should say, and it still works very nicely for something like Atziri and other boss fights. So I do recommend at least putting in a Frenzy setup somewhere, and it's basically a Fortify on hit, which is great. But now that I've got Life Leech, I'm running Blood Rage, because it's a bit smoother, and the important thing there is with a quality Blood Rage, you have 20% extra attack speed, and that is quite a lot for the build, because it doesn't really get that much attack speed throughout the passive tree. Running a Flame Golem, just because I kind of value 20% increased damage over 30% crit on the Ice Golem. Don't even know where he is. There he is. 30% crit on the Ice Golem, you're not using the accuracy at all, so that's kind of a waste. I just went with the damage over the crit, because I end up having about 91 crit overall with all my power charges up, and that brings us to the passive tree. Essentially, you are grabbing every single crit node everywhere. So he's starting off as Shadow to get the Ellie nodes, get the crit there, all that crit, all this dagger crit, all that dagger crit. No Adders Touch because crit multi for daggers only applies to the Cyclone, not the spells, which is doing all of the damage. Go down here, you get your Acro, you get your Phase Acro, get some more crit, get the life. Veil Pact I only just took, and you don't need if you don't have Life Leech. Pick up jewels along the way, all that crit, all this evasion, all that life, all that crit. God damn, that's some good crit. And then you get some AoE and some life, and whatnot. Now if you don't have Veil Pact, 1% life regen's pretty nice to have as well. EE, I feel it's really hard to make work with the setup, and it's just not worth the 6 points. You end up running a lot of EE maps anyway, so to do that you just drop Anger, and that basically just makes your Flame Surge one-shot everything, as opposed to all the things doing damage. If you can fit EE in there somehow, go for it. It can still be effective. I feel it's just a few too many points in my already spread out passive tree, and I don't really need it, so I'm not going with it. As far as jewels go, trying to get life, damage, spell damage with shields, attack speed with daggers, attack speed, all kinds of stuff like that, but the main component is life. Because the tree in the end has about 150% life, and then jewels just give you that little bit more. As well as, if you can get spell power, they'll fill out a lot of the spell power on the tree. Lastly, leveling. Leveling was pretty damn easy once you have the right stuff. You do need yourself one of these guys, will definitely make it a lot faster, as well as the Orion Jewelry, as well as a Vegan Dagger. But yeah, as soon as I hit 38, I was cast on critting with 4 spells all the way through the game, face rolling, and it was thoroughly good fun. It's been a bit of a struggle FPS wise, I'm not gonna lie, for this entire league. Especially Tempest. Tempest, so many ground effects, Beyond, so many ground effects, so many monsters, so much shit going everywhere. So play this at your own risk. Is it hardcore viable? I mean, if you play it safe enough, not on this league, because you'll just end up dying to straight up screen freezes. When you can't play your character, you can't play hardcore. So I'd be careful with that. Otherwise, yeah, if you build it defensively enough and play it safe enough, I think you can do it on hardcore as well. So this has been my kind of fake Wildstrike build. It's more or less just cast and crit Cyclone with some spells, and I'll leave whatever spells you want to use up to you. I am, once again, Mouthful, and thank you very much for watching.